Play it again. Did she really say that on stage? The clip froze on a frame burned into everyone's feeds. The real estate mogul's wife in her blazing red dress, arms stretched out like a judge delivering a sentence, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This isn't for farm girls," she shouted. The ballroom's echo became the internet's roar. Within hours, her words turned into headlines, hashtags, and parodies spreading like wildfire. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to the woman they mocked, back to the black CEO. The phone screens replayed the moment again and again. On Twitter, on TikTok, on late-night shows. The mogul's wife laughed that night, thinking she had humiliated someone out of place. But the camera never lies. Every sneer, every curl of disdain on her lips was magnified and dissected. The crowd online wasn't laughing with her. They were furious. Meanwhile, the black CEO hadn't said a word. In the footage, she stood tall in her vibrant orange dress, posture straight as steel, contract folder firm in her grip. The camera caught her silence, the kind of silence that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Her gaze didn't flinch, didn't bow. It stayed fixed, calm but piercing, while chaos spilled around her. Comment sections exploded. Why is she being treated like this in 2025? This is disgraceful. I stand with her. Farm girl? She probably owns half the city. The mogul's wife underestimated the world outside the gala. Out there, dignity had its audience, and the audience was growing louder every hour. By dawn, news anchors were replaying the video. The Chiron read, "Humiliation at $8 point, 3 billion rupees, tower ceremony sparks outrage." Sponsors called. PR managers scrambled. Phones buzzed with panic in the mogul's empire. The wife hadn't just mocked a guest. She had mocked someone who controlled billions, and the internet was holding her accountable. The CEO, however, moved differently. No frantic press release, no defensive live stream. She let the world do the talking. She knew silence, when held with strength, becomes a weapon sharper than scandal. And while the mogul's wife drowned in a storm of her own making, the black CEO was already planning her next move. A move no one, least of all the one in the red dress, would see coming. The video didn't just trend, it detonated. Within 24 hours, the clip of the mogul's wife pointing her manicured finger at the black CEO had crossed 40 million views. News outlets clipped the insult, looping it under bold captions. "This isn't for farm girls." TikTok turned the phrase into a meme, splicing it with images of barns dissolving into skyscrapers, farm animals edited next to the $8 point 3 billion rupees tower model on stage. The wife's laughter, carefree, smug, dripping with superiority, was now the internet's soundtrack of mockery. Every smirk she flashed at the ceremony was frozen, remixed, slowed down. What she thought was triumph had become evidence. Meanwhile, the black CEO appeared only in fragments, a still frame, her orange dress a blaze of defiance against the sterile blue-white lights of the opening ceremony. A close-up, her eyes steady, lips pressed in quiet restraint. TikTok captions read, "That's the face of a queen who doesn't need to shout." Twitter threads declared, "This is power without a single word." Sponsors noticed, clients noticed, even ordinary viewers who knew nothing about real estate paused, shared, and commented, "This is 2025 and people still act like this?" Imagine humiliating someone who literally owns the contract in her hand. Farm girl? She's the only one acting like royalty in that room. At first, the mogul's wife dismissed it. She posed for Instagram, posted a story in her red cocktail dress captioned, "Unbothered, some people just don't belong." She thought it was clever, but the internet doesn't forgive arrogance twice. Comments flooded in thousands of angry emojis, furious replies, hashtags calling for boycotts. Late-night comedians smelled blood. One host leaned over his desk, grinning. "You know you've messed up when half the country is calling you the villain in someone else's success story." The audience roared. But through it all, the black CEO stayed silent. No interviews, no tweets, no staged selfies. Her silence became the story. Anchors asked, "Why hasn't she spoken?" Analysts speculated, "She doesn't need to. The numbers will speak." And while the mogul's wife fought comment sections with condescension, the black CEO met quietly with advisors, her presence calm, deliberate. She didn't chase the narrative. She let the storm rage, knowing exactly where it was heading. Because in scandals like this, timing is everything, and her timing was flawless. By the third day, the scandal had a life of its own. Every major network ran split screens. On one side, the mogul's wife frozen mid-gesture, arms stretched like a blade, lips curled with disdain. On the other, the black CEO in her orange dress, chin lifted, holding her contract steady beneath the cold lights. The captions wrote themselves, "Disdain and Dignity. The $8.3 billion rupees stare down." Paparazzi camped outside the mogul's penthouse. Every time the wife stepped out, flashbulbs lit up like a trial. Reporters shouted questions. "Do you regret the comment? Are you worried about losing deals?" Her answer? A scoff. "Please, it was a joke. People need thicker skin." But the more she brushed it off, the louder the fire grew. Morning talk shows replayed her dismissive tone, analysts shaking their heads. That's not a joke. That's bias on a stage built for progress. Inside corporate towers, the fallout was measured not in retweets but in numbers. One sponsor quietly pulled out of a luxury development project. Another froze negotiations, citing reputation concerns. The mogul's empire, once bulletproof, suddenly looked fragile. Meanwhile, the black CEO's silence filled airtime. Networks began inviting experts to interpret her restraint. One professor of business ethics said, "Silence is a power move. She's not just avoiding the mud, she's controlling the frame. Every hour she doesn't speak, the focus stays on the wife's arrogance, not on her." Social media agreed. Hashtags shifted from outrage to admiration. Farm girl power trended, with users posting pictures of women in fields, on construction sites, in boardrooms. Tagline, "Not your stereotype, not your limit." And still, the black CEO said nothing. She was photographed once, leaving a glass skyscraper downtown. No statement, no entourage, just her precise walk through the marble lobby. The press captioned it, "Power in Motion." In contrast, the mogul's wife launched a live stream. The camera angle was perfect, her red lipstick sharp against her pale skin. She began, "People are overreacting. I was defending tradition. Our industry isn't for outsiders." But the internet tore it apart. Clips of her words were edited into horror-style trailers, the soundtrack heavy with booze. Comment sections lit up. "She still doesn't get it." The media cycle turned ruthless. Outrage became spectacle. Spectacle became entertainment. And entertainment became leverage. Leverage only one woman knew how to use. Because while the mogul's wife drowned in microphones and camera flashes, the black CEO was already behind closed doors, speaking in rooms where the real deals happened. The headlines screamed. The mogul's wife trended for all the wrong reasons. Every meme, every late-night monologue painted her as the villain. And yet, through the uproar, the black CEO remained motionless in the public eye. She was not absent, she was deliberate. In her private office, glass walls reflecting the skyline she helped finance, she sat at her desk, the infamous contract resting under her hand. Advisors urged her to respond. PR specialists drafted statements, apologies framed as grace, sharp rebuttals framed as power. She read none of them. Instead, she closed the folder, pushed it aside, and spoke softly. "Dignity doesn't scream, it waits for the right strike." That line carried the weight of her philosophy. For years, she had navigated boardrooms where her voice was underestimated, her presence scrutinized. She learned early that every reaction was a transaction. Anger could be twisted, words could be weaponized, but silence? Silence was untouchable. While the mogul's wife ranted on live streams and posed for tabloids, the black CEO charted patterns. She studied how quickly sponsorships evaporated, how investors whispered of instability. She saw the mogul's empire cracking not from external attack, but from arrogance within. Her staff reported back. One international partner wanted reassurance. Another hedge fund considered redirecting capital. She nodded, not rushing, not pleading. She knew markets responded not to noise, but to confidence. And confidence radiates most when it doesn't flinch. The world noticed. Commentators began framing her silence as strategy. On CNN, one anchor leaned forward, voice hushed. "Every word from the mogul's wife digs her deeper. Every word not spoken by the black CEO raises her higher. That's not passivity, that's power. And for the CEO herself, it was more than strategy. It was survival honed into elegance. She remembered every room where she was told she didn't belong. She remembered the condescension disguised as courtesy. Now, in the eye of this storm, she chose not to fight the way her opponent expected. She chose to let the storm reveal who truly stood steady. Night fell. City lights shimmered against her office glass. She stood, walked toward the window, and let the skyline's reflection wrap around her like armor. The mogul's wife had screamed. The internet had roared. The press had speculated. But she waited. Because she knew storms don't last, but reputations built on silence, and steel those endure. The first blow didn't come from a headline. It came from a balance sheet. A luxury hotel chain once proudly plastering its name across the mogul's developments issued a quiet press release. Due to reputational concerns, we are suspending further collaboration. It was brief, clinical, but in the world of capital, it was thunder. Inside the mogul's glass empire, board members panicked. Numbers don't lie. Contracts paused. Creditors called. A $200 million deal in Dubai froze overnight. By morning, whispers echoed across trading floors. Is the empire shaky? The mogul's wife, still dressed in her signature red, dismissed it all. She sneered in a private gathering. They're just overreacting. We've built towers bigger than their courage. Her laughter rang out, brittle against the silence of uneasy investors. But outside, the dominoes began to fall. A European bank announced a temporary review of their $1.1 billion rupees line of credit. A major retail partner delayed payments, citing brand risk. Shareholders grumbled in corridors. Every step she took in arrogance created aftershocks she didn't feel yet. And all the while, the black CEO said nothing, but her presence was everywhere. On social media, users spliced images, the mogul's wife pointing with venom, and beside it, screenshots of plunging stock prices. Captions read, "When arrogance costs billions." Memes mocked, "Farm girl? No, billion-dollar queen." In the boardrooms, it was no joke. An executive whispered to another, "She's killing us with silence. Every sponsor gone makes her look stronger." Another replied, "The optics are lethal. We're bleeding not because she speaks, but because she doesn't." Meanwhile, the black CEO's phone buzzed with quiet messages of support. Not tweets, not public gestures, but direct offers from investors, partners, rivals of the mogul. They smelled opportunity. They wanted her calm, her credibility, her precision. She didn't answer, not yet. Timing remained her sharpest weapon. In her office, she placed the contract back into its leather case, sliding it across her desk. Her assistant asked, nervous, "Do you want me to draft a statement?" She shook her head slowly. Let the numbers speak." And they did. Every hour, every day. As another sponsor pulled out, as another investor retreated, the mogul's wife doubled down on bravado. She strutted into events, chin high, cameras flashing. But behind her, the empire she flaunted began to tremble. The irony was sharp. She had tried to humiliate dignity at a tower opening. Now, dignity silent, unbothered, relentless, was humiliating her bank accounts. And the world was just beginning to notice. The internet firestorm didn't stay online. It spilled into the streets. By the end of the week, the mogul's flagship tower downtown was no longer just a monument of glass and steel. It was a stage for protest. Dozens of people lined the plaza, holding cardboard signs scrawled with black paint. Respect dignity. Not your farm girl. $8.3 billion rupees doesn't buy humanity. What began as a few voices turned into hundreds. Students, workers, even retired neighbors who once admired the mogul's projects now stood with anger in their eyes. Microphones picked up their chants, echoing between skyscrapers. "We stand with her! We stand with her!" Television crews swarmed, broadcasting live images of a city's conscience rising against arrogance. Commentators narrated with incredulity. It's rare to see this much backlash for a single insult. But this wasn't just an insult, it was a symbol of class, race, and power colliding in plain sight. Inside the mogul's penthouse, curtains were drawn tight. The wife, draped again in crimson silk, scoffed at the footage. "Let them shout. They'll get bored. Towers don't fall because of signs. But outside, pressure mounted. Police were called not to suppress violence, but to keep order as the crowds grew. Chants turned rhythmic, drums beating, voices unified. Dignity over dollars. Dignity over dollars. Meanwhile, investigative journalists dug deeper. Old stories surfaced tales of staff humiliated at galas, of young entrepreneurs dismissed at networking events. Patterns emerged, all pointing back to the mogul's wife. Each revelation hardened public opinion. And yet, the black CEO remained unseen. No speech, no march, no camera-ready appearance. But her presence lingered over the protests like a silent banner. People carried posters with her silhouette in orange, the viral freeze frame from the ceremony calm, unbowed, a contract in her hand. To them, she wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. She was an emblem. The mogul's advisors grew restless. In meetings, voices clashed. One slammed his fist on the table. "We're losing the public. Every chant outside those towers bleeds into our balance sheets." Another snapped back. "We can't control this narrative unless she apologizes." Eyes turned to the wife. She only crossed her arms, her tone icy. "Apologies are for the weak." But weakness was already showing. Deals fell through faster. Share prices dipped lower. Investors didn't just fear the numbers, they feared the crowds. And those crowds weren't leaving. Night after night, the protests swelled, candles glowing against the glass facade of the mogul's empire. The chants never stopped. The message was clear. The world had chosen sides, and the side it chose wasn't hers. The boardroom was silent, save for the ticking of an antique clock. Men in dark suits sat rigid around the long mahogany table, their reflections fractured in its polished surface. At the head sat the real estate mogul himself, stone-faced, lips pressed into a thin line. Beside him, in defiant contrast, his wife reclined in her chair, crimson dress shimmering under the recessed lights, as if she were attending a gala rather than a crisis. An executive cleared his throat. "We've lost 3 sponsors in 48 hours. Credit agencies are reviewing our debt structure. The market is watching us bleed." Another added sharply, "And it's not just business. This is personal reputation. Our name is trending for the wrong reasons." The mogul's jaw clenched. He had built his empire brick by brick, tower by tower, only to watch it tremble because of a single sentence uttered under the glare of chandeliers. His silence carried the weight of a man measuring fury against consequence. The wife rolled her eyes. "Enough dramatics." It was one comment. "People are fickle. This storm will pass." But the storm wasn't passing, it was accelerating. One board member leaned forward, voice low but dangerous. "Your arrogance is costing us billions. You mocked someone who controls more capital than half this room combined." Her laughter was sharp, almost mocking. "Oh, please." She waved a contract on stage and the internet crowned her a saint. "Do you really believe she has the power to take us down?" The room tightened. No one answered, but their silence was heavy with disbelief. They did believe. They saw the numbers. They saw the protests outside. They saw the headlines multiplying like cracks in glass. The mogul finally spoke, his voice gravelly, each word chosen like a blade. "This empire was built on credibility. Without it, the towers fall." His gaze shifted to his wife, lingering stern. "And right now, you are the crack in our foundation." Her smile faltered for the first time. Just slightly, a flicker of unease beneath the rouge and confidence. She turned her head away, refusing to answer, but the damage was visible. After the meeting adjourned, the mogul remained seated, staring at the skyline that once symbolized his triumph. Outside, the chants from protesters faintly carried into the room. "Dignity over dollars." The sound cut through the glass, steady, unyielding. He realized something he would never admit aloud. This wasn't just a PR disaster. This was an existential threat. And the person who triggered it all, the woman his wife had mocked, hadn't spoken a single word. While the mogul's empire trembled, the black CEO moved with the patience of a grandmaster across a chessboard. It began in a private lounge on the top floor of an international bank. The walls glowed with subtle gold. The city skyline stretched behind glass like a conquered prize. She sat at a small round table, not with reporters, not with protest leaders, but with 2 men and 1 woman representing a global investment consortium. Their portfolios dwarfed even the mogul's holdings. She didn't arrive with a speech. She didn't need to. She arrived with presence orange fabric, a streak of fire against the room's muted tones, her contract case resting neatly before her. One of the investors leaned in. "We've been watching the fallout. Billions are pulling back from him. His towers are vulnerable. But your silence, your restraint has made you the center of credibility." Another added, "If you're willing, we're prepared to reallocate up to 8.3 billion away from his developments toward yours." The CEO didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded once, absorbing the magnitude of the offer. The same figure, the same number that symbolized the tower where she was mocked, now circled back as leverage in her hands. Her response was precise. "I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to build. If you want to invest, it will be on terms of dignity and equality. No shortcuts, no arrogance." The room was silent for a beat. Then, almost in unison, the investors nodded. Outside, rumors began to trickle through the financial press. Anonymous sources whispered of a major capital shift. Headlines speculated, "Is the $8.3 billion rupees tower changing hands?" Analysts debated on live television. Some said it was impossible. Others said it was inevitable. Meanwhile, the mogul's wife doubled down on her bravado. At a charity luncheon, she raised a glass and sneered into the microphone. "Some people confuse silence with strength. To me, it looks like weakness." Cameras caught the smirk. Social media caught the irony. The clip went viral instantly, not as power, but as proof of her blindness. And in the contrast, the black CEO's move sharpened. She didn't need to answer the insult. She didn't need to attend luncheons. The very markets the mogul once commanded were now orbiting around her composure. By nightfall, her assistant placed the contract back on her desk. This time, it wasn't just a document, it was a symbol. The world thought it was about humiliation. She knew it was about direction, and now billions of dollars were waiting for her word. Her hand rested on the leather case. The timing was close, very close, because silence had carried her this far. But soon, her first strike would land. The walls were closing in. Tabloids once friendly to the mogul's family now printed unflattering photos of his wife, headlines dripping with ridicule, from high society to high liability. Her once glamorous reputation had turned into a liability no PR firm could sanitize. Still, she refused to yield. At a hastily organized press conference, she arrived draped in scarlet again, defiance stitched into every thread. Cameras flashed, microphones leaned forward. She raised her chin, voice sharp. "I will not be silenced by mobs or manipulated by false narratives. I stand for tradition, for excellence, for keeping our industry in the hands of those who earned it, not outsiders who bought their way in." The room went still. For a moment, she believed her words would land like thunder, but then gasps, murmurs, the kind of whispers that ripple when someone has just sealed their fate. Within minutes, clips of her tirade hit Twitter. The phrase, "not outsiders," was replayed endlessly, dissected in threads, mocked in memes. One viral tweet read, translation, "She means not black, not women, not anyone she can't control." It gained 500,000 likes in 12 hours. Sponsors who hadn't yet cut ties now rushed to issue statements. "We denounce all discriminatory rhetoric." The mogul's empire bled faster than before. His board members grimaced on camera, refusing interviews. Shareholders whispered of votes, of ultimatums, of shifting allegiances. Behind the penthouse curtains, she paced furiously. "They twist my words. They always twist my words," she hissed, throwing a crystal glass against the marble floor. The mogul, weary and silent, didn't stop her. He simply looked at the skyline he no longer controlled. The protests outside doubled. Candles became torches. Chants became songs. Some held posters of her red-dressed sneer. Others carried the now iconic still of the black CEO, calm, orange-clad, unshaken. The contrast was undeniable. And in boardrooms across the city, whispers grew louder. "She's dragging the empire down." One director murmured, "Every word she speaks costs us millions. Every day she refuses to apologize costs us billions." The wife, oblivious, doubled down yet again. "They'll see," she muttered to herself. "They'll see I'm the one who belongs here, not her." But the world had already seen. Her desperation, once hidden behind champagne and chandeliers, was now projected on every screen. The harder she fought, the deeper she sank. And somewhere in the city, the black CEO watched, unflinching, as the tide pulled her enemy further out to sea. The silence was almost cruel. The mogul's penthouse, once a symbol of untouchable success, now felt like a bunker under siege. Curtains drawn, phones buzzing non-stop, aides whispering bad news like funeral prayers. He sat alone at the dining table, untouched crystal glasses gleaming under dim chandeliers. Across from him, his wife still wore her crimson armor, lips painted as if a smear of color could mask the cracks in her empire. For days, he had tolerated her defiance. But tolerance was a luxury he could no longer afford. The CFO's report lay open before him. Red ink slashed across the pages, sponsors gone, partnerships frozen, billions in market value evaporated. The numbers didn't just bleed, they screamed. He exhaled heavily. "Do you understand what you've done?" His voice was gravel, low but lethal. She scoffed, swirling the untouched wine in her glass. "I spoke the truth. If people can't handle it, that's their weakness, not mine." His fist slammed the table. The crystal rattled, the echo slicing through the silence. "Weakness? You've turned this empire into a circus. I built towers on credibility, on alliances, and you've burned them down with a sentence." Her face hardened, but her voice rose, shrill. "Don't blame me because they're threatened by her. She doesn't belong in our world. She never did." The mogul's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind his gaze. "And yet, she's the one holding the future of our world in her hands." The words struck harder than glass. For a moment, her bravado faltered. She looked away, but her reflection in the penthouse window betrayed her a crack of doubt, a flicker of fear. That night, board members called an emergency session. Some demanded her removal from public appearances. Others whispered of severing her influence entirely. Their language grew sharp. "She's not an asset, she's a liability." And for the first time, the mogul didn't defend her. He sat silent, shoulders heavy, eyes fixed on the red ink of the CFO's report. Outside, the protests swelled louder, candles and torches flickering like fireflies against the glass towers. Inside, the mogul realized he was at his breaking point. He could no longer choose loyalty to his wife without sacrificing the empire he had spent a lifetime building. He whispered to himself, almost too softly for anyone to hear, "One more mistake, and we lose everything." And somewhere across the city, the black CEO, silent, calculating, waited. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to fight. Her enemy was unraveling from within. The breaking point had come, and the final blow was close. The city awoke to rumors. Financial channels buzzed with speculation. Is a takeover imminent? Traders whispered of sudden moves, contracts shifting hands in midnight meetings. Something was happening, but only one woman knew the full scope. In the highest floor of her own tower, the black CEO prepared her strike. She stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, dawn light spilling across her orange dress like fire on steel. The contract, the same one she had lifted at the opening ceremony, now bore new signatures. Investors, banks, global partners, the weight of $8.3 billion rupees redirected, not away into the air but directly into her hands. Her chief advisor entered quietly, voice steady but tinged with awe. "It's done. The consortium approved. You now control a majority stake in the tower." She nodded once, calm, composed. No celebration, no gloating, just inevitability. "Then release the statement." The press exploded within the hour. Headlines in bold, splashed across every outlet. Black CEO takes control of $8.3 billion rupees tower. Mogul's empire fractures as new power rises. Cameras flocked to the tower plaza, where protesters transformed their chants into cheers. Signs once painted in anger now raised in triumph. "Dignity wins. The tower is hers." Across town, chaos reigned in the mogul's headquarters. Executives shouted over one another, phones ringing endlessly. Markets plunged further, analysts tearing apart the family's reputation. The mogul sat in silence, broken by inevitability, while his wife stormed across the room in fury. "She stole it! This was ours!" A board member finally snapped. "Number, you handed it to her. Every insult, every arrogant word, you gave her the leverage to own this." But the black CEO didn't need their approval. She was already walking the polished marble lobby of the newly claimed tower. Cameras surged forward, desperate for her first words. She paused, looking directly into the swarm of microphones, her voice calm and unwavering. "Power isn't loud, It doesn't scream, it doesn't humiliate. Real power builds, real power lasts. The plaza erupted in applause, her words reverberating across screens worldwide. And in that moment, she wasn't just a businesswoman reclaiming dignity. She was a symbol, a black CEO who had turned silence into strategy, insult into empire, and an $8.3 billion rupees humiliation into her ultimate triumph. The final strike had landed. The plaza was quiet now. The crowds had dispersed, the chants faded into memory, but the glow of victory lingered in the air, etched into the steel and glass of the $8.3 billion rupees tower that now bore her name. Inside, the black CEO stood alone on the top floor, hands resting lightly against the cool glass, surveying the city. The skyline glittered beneath her, each building a monument to ambition. But tonight, one tower told a story larger than profit margins or architectural triumphs. It told a story of dignity reclaiming its throne. Reporters called it the takeover of the decade. Financial analysts called it a textbook lesson in silent leverage. But for the people in the streets, the students, the workers, the mothers and daughters, it was more than business. It was proof. Proof that silence can roar louder than arrogance. Proof that a black woman, mocked as a farm girl in front of flashing cameras, could turn humiliation into empire. The mogul's wife had vanished from public view. The once glittering hostess of galas and charity luncheons was now reduced to whispers in tabloids. Isolated, shunned, her arrogance remembered only as a cautionary tale. Her husband, battered and weary, watched his empire shrink, knowing the damage had not come from markets alone but from words he hadn't stopped. The black CEO, meanwhile, didn't gloat. There was no champagne, no extravagant party. Instead, she gathered her team in the tower's conference hall, its long table glowing under soft lights. She placed the contract at the center and spoke with quiet authority. This is not just a building. It's a reminder. Every decision we make here must honor what brought us to this point: dignity, equity, and the refusal to bow to prejudice. If we forget that, we become no better than what we defeated. Her team listened, eyes fixed, as if hearing not just a directive, but a manifesto. Later, as night deepened, she walked alone through the lobby where it had all begun, the place where laughter and mockery once cut into her like knives. Now, the marble floor echoed with her steps alone, steady and calm. A security guard nodded respectfully, and for the first time, she allowed herself the faintest of smiles. This tower was no longer a symbol of exclusion. It was hers, a testament, a legacy. And as the city lights shimmered beyond the glass, her voice lingered in the silence, almost like a vow. They said I didn't belong, but I built belonging into every stone of this city, and no one can take that away. The story was complete. Not just a victory, a legacy.